Please subscribe to this channel for more videos related to Catholic Christian teaching. Most theologians agree with St. Thomas that before the fall, there were in paradise no instruments of grace perceptible to the senses and instituted by God. As man in the primitive condition was free from sin, he had no need for these means of salvation. Also, since the higher powers of man dominated the lower, it was not appropriate that the spiritual soul should be perfected by corporal elements. Some theologians, on the other hand, invoking St. Augustine, consider the tree of life and marriage in the Garden of Paradise to be sacraments. According to St. Thomas, this marriage was not a means of grace, but a natural institution. On the ground of God's universal will of salvation, theologians generally postulate with St. Augustine and St. Thomas that during the period from the fall to Abraham and for the pagan world up to the promulgation of the gospel, there was a so-called Sacramentum Naturae, by which young children were liberated from original sin. This nature sacrament consisted in an act of faith in God and, at least implicitly, in the future Redeemer, which was made in the name of the children by the elders, and which was probably outwardly manifested by the use of an appropriate outward sign, prayer and blessing. During the period from Abraham to Moses, circumcision was for the male Israelites the ordinary means of purification from original sin. Pope Innocent III, concurring with scholastic theology, teaches original sin was remitted by the mystery of circumcision, and thus the danger of damnation was avoided. Scholastic theology follows St. Augustine and St. Gregory the Great in this matter. The early fathers, St. Justin, St. Irenaeus, Tertullian, saw in circumcision only a sign of the covenant and a model of baptism, not a means for attaining salvation. According to the general teaching of the Fathers and of the theologians, during the era of the Mosaic Law, there were, side by side with circumcision, as a figure of baptism. In him also you were circumcised with a spiritual circumcision, by putting off the body of the flesh in the circumcision of Christ. Other sacraments, for example, the Paschal Lamb and the offering of food, as figures of the Eucharist, purifications and ablutions as figures of the sacrament of penance, consecration rites as figures of the sacrament of holy orders. The Old Testament sacraments wrought ex opere operato, not grace, but merely an external legal purity. The Decretum pro Armenes of the Union Council of Florence in 1439 teaches in accordance with the teaching of St. Thomas. The sacraments of the Old Law did not cause grace, but they only prefigured the grace to be given through the passion of Christ. Ex opere operato is a Latin phrase meaning by the work performed, and in reference to sacraments signifies that they derive their efficacy not from the minister or recipient, but from the sacrament, considered independently of the merits of the minister or the recipient. For the work which receives its efficacy from the condition of the agent, the term used is ex opere operantis, meaning by the work of the worker. St. Paul calls the cult institutions of the Old Covenant weak and deficient elements, and teaches that they were not able to bestow inner purity of conscience, but could communicate an outer legal purity only. Hebrews chapter 9 clarifies, "This is a symbol of the present time, during which gifts and sacrifices are offered that cannot perfect the conscience of the worshipper. For if the blood of goats and of oxen and the ashes of the heifer, being sprinkled, can sanctify those who are defiled, it is only so their flesh is clean flesh." As the entire Old Covenant was our pedagogue in Christ, so the Old Testament sacraments as types pointed to the future riches of the Messianic era. For since the law has but a shadow of the good things to come, and were thus a confession of faith in the coming Redeemer, by awakening the consciousness of sinfulness and faith in the coming Redeemer, with the cooperation of actual grace in the recipient, they created a disposition favorable to the reception of sanctifying grace, which God then conferred, and thus these sacraments brought about inner sanctification ex opere operantis. Circumcision performed on young infants effected the inner sanctification neither ex opere operato, as in baptism, nor merely ex opere operantis, that is, not merely by reason of the faith of the representative of the recipient, but quasi ex opere operato, as an objective confession of faith in the coming Redeemer. It was for God the occasion of regularly bestowing the grace of sanctification. In circumcision, grace was bestowed not in the power of the circumcision, but in the power of faith in the passion of Christ, whose sign circumcision was. Please go to YouTube Retiramentality channel, playlist, Sacraments, for the complete series of these materials.